Om Sahanavavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om. Shanno Mitrasham Varunaha Shanno Bhavatvaryama Shanna Indro Brihaspatihi Shanno Vishnurukramaha Namo Brahmane Namaste Vayo Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahmasi Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahma Vadishyami Ritam Vadishyami Satyam Vadishyami Tanmamavatu Tadvaktaramavatu Avatu Mam Avatu Vaktaram. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So this is the first section of the Taittiriya Upanishad. As you may already remember, Taittiriya Upanishad is one of the 10 prominent Upanishads which are being expounded by Adi Shankaracharya. And this Upanishad is from Krishna Yajurveda. The Upanishad contains a number of very interesting topics related to philology, phonetics, syntax, etymology, and the traditional hermeneutic principles of Vedic studies, and a number of different methods of meditation using different symbols, and also the analysis is a complete analysis of the human personality, which is called the Panchakosha discussion. So anyway, it contains a number of very interesting topics. It's divided into 3 sections, and each section is called a Valli. So Siksha Valli, Bhruguvalli, Anandavalli, these are the sections. So what I'm going to discuss today is a few interesting topics which are relevant to our times. Now, they are in the form of convocation addresses and discussion between a father and son on some and debates on some of the most profound topics in Vedanta philosophy. It's a very interesting, very celebrated topic. So before we enter the first section, I should try to explain the real etymological meaning, the conventional interpretation of the word Upanishad itself. You know, Upanishad, the word originally comes from the Sanskrit root Shad. So Panini, the great Sanskrit grammarian, he has used the word Shadul. It's a verbal root, which means it goes away, something that eventually disappears. That's the meaning of the particular root, the verbal root. And before the verbal root, you find 2 prefixes. This discussion is important to understand the deeper implications of what we are going to discuss in today's session. That's why I'm referring to the etymology and the grammatical description of the word Upanishad. So the verbal root itself means something that goes away, subtle. It becomes sat due to a process of grammatical etymology that we are not going to discuss. Now, there are 2 words before the word sat. It's called upa, ni. If an upa is one, ni is another. So Upanishad is right. Upa means coming near, going near, being in close proximity with. So it is one of the prefixes. Prefixes are called upasarga in Sanskrit. Sanskrit has got a good number of upasargas. The most important upasargas are 23 number, but an extended list also you can get in the Sanskrit grammatical tradition. It goes beyond 26. But the basic upasargas are 23 in number. When these upasargas or prefixes are added to the verbal root, the meaning of the verbal root may undergo a complete change, may get reinforced, may get refined, emphasized, and sometimes it completely alters the meaning of the Sanskrit root. So here what is happening is, upa is the one upasarga prefix which means nearby, close by. Ni means sitting down. I mean, politely, you are sitting near a teacher, politely to learn from him. So the tradition itself is linked to the Sanskrit etymological interpretation. Means Upanishads were taught by the Vedic sages in the Vedic hermitages to students who came from different parts of the country. After many of them, after renouncing everything, they came to these Vedic sages and learned from him, living in his own hermitage. That's why Upasamipe means the students have to live along with the teacher in the same Vedic hermitage. And very often students had to be tested for their qualities and their fitness for studying this spiritual philosophical system. So for that they were tested. So they had to be polite, humble, intelligent, and ability to accept what is to be accepted and filter out and reject what is to be rejected. But ability of proper discerning wisdom was necessary. Then you find another word, it's called pratyaya. Pratyaya is a suffix. Suffix means that comes after the root. So what comes before the root is called the prefix, and what is added later after the root is put in place, it's called suffix. So there is a suffix here, kit pratyaya, which slightly changes the structure of the word. So what it means is, Upanishad means something that helps you to get rid of ignorance, and again it takes you towards spiritual enlightenment. So gati avasadana. Gati means it helps you to reach and to attain your destination. Gati means gamanam, going towards, moving towards. So Upanishad helps you, when you study under a teacher, the Upanishad helps you to remove your ignorance, remove all worldly bondages, and remove all the negativity, skepticism, doubt, and all the notes within our mind. And it helps us to reach our spiritual goal. It removes all the hindrances and obstacles from our mental world and helps us to move forward towards our spiritual destination. That itself, that meaning, the interpretation of the word Upanishad itself has something to do with what we are going to discuss in today's class. Now the first section that I am going to take is from Sikshavalli. It contains certain instructions, general instructions. And what do these instructions deal with? Duty, responsibility, how to go about doing your duties, performing your obligations to society, to your family, and how to become a civilized human being. After this, there is another convocation address which is more focused on the qualities you have to develop to be a responsible member of the family and a responsible member of society. That's another set of instructions which I will discuss after this. The first one is this. So it begins like this. Rutam cha swadhyaya pravachane cha satyam cha swadhyaya pravachane cha tapascha swadhyaya pravachane cha. You find certain words are repeated. Swadhyaya pravachane cha means. What it means is the practice of Rutam. The practice of Rutam, what is the practice of Rutam? Rutam is what is right and proper and appropriate, and what is according to the tradition and according to the principles of sustenance and prosperity of society, family, and our neighborhood altogether. So you should practice what is appropriate, what is right, and what is acceptable to your own mind, what is conducive to your own inner welfare. So that particular word is used, Rutam. Rutam is a very prominent term in the Rigvedic literature. Rutam in Vedas, in the Samhita portion of the Rigveda, is a very profound word. You know what it means? It means something that helps the world to remain in a state of harmony, peace and tranquility, without any conflicts, without any contradictions, and without any problems. So our conduct, our actions, our practices, the way we respond to different situations in life, the way we respond to our own environment, all should be conducive to the preservation of human civilization, welfare of people around, which means it should be for the good and welfare of the whole society. The Swadhyaya Pravachana is mentioned here. What it means is, so you should learn these ideas from the Vedas and you should teach these Vedas to others in the context of Vedic culture. Teaching others here means if you are a father or mother, then you should teach these values to your next generation. If you are a teacher, then you have to teach these values to your students. So that Rutam, which is a complete philosophy of life in itself, the word Rutam. It is Rutam, it is very close to the English word Rhythm means, which is a fully fragment of the real implication of the Sanskrit word. It means something that helps the world to remain in a state of harmony, peace, interrelatedness. That's the meaning of Rhythm. So Rhythm, Satyam, Dharma, these three words you find in the Vedic literature. Dharma means the way we act, the way we perform our duties and responsibilities according to certain ethical and moral principles, so that we do not disturb this invisible structure of harmony and peace that puts the world together in a thread of spiritual unity. So, for example, if we cut down the trees, you are actually violating rhythm. You can see even in a very physical sense when we disturb the environment, polluting the air, water, being because of deforestation, cutting down trees, all these will somehow or other disturb the existing rhythm of human life on earth. And doing our duty in such a way as not to disturb this rhythm is dharma, and the philosophical principle behind this good conduct is called satyam. So you can find these words are used again and again. So Rutam cha sadhyaya pravachanebhya. So what it means is we must learn the Vedas, learn the scriptures, learn these ideas with a sense of sanctity and sacredness. Swadhyaya means, one's own study. So it's not to get knowledge. The study itself takes on a new dimension in this context. In fact, to study, to promote your intellectual powers, itself becomes a sacred act. There is a sacredness, a sanctity attached to study books, to study ideas, which may teach us on proper context, which is rhythm. So, studying and teaching ideas which are conducive for the preservation of tranquility and peace and harmony in society should itself be undertaken as a sacred act. An element of sanctity is brought in to this concept of study or intellectual endeavor. So it is not to get an idea. You see, when you want to work a machine, when you want to operate a machine, you may read a manual, and once you read the manual and once you know how to operate a machine, then that idea is of no more use. When you go to a shop, and before going to shop for shopping, you may have prepared a list of items to be bought for the shop. And once you reach the shop and you finish shopping, buying all those items on the paper, then you don't preserve that paper with a sense of sanctity and sacredness. You throw away. So that is one kind of using ideas. But in the context of Swadhyaya and Pravachana, what it means is these great ideas contained in the scriptures should be studied regularly with a sense of sanctity and sacredness, because the study itself becomes a sacred act. It is not to get an idea, but that very daily contact, the scriptural study itself becomes a sacred duty. That's why one should not neglect the sacred duty of studying Holy Scriptures, books that help us to live a proper life in this world. And this instruction continues, tapascha swadhyaya pravachaneccha, dhamascha swadhyaya pravachaneccha, aknayascha swadhyaya pravachaneccha, agnihotramcha swadhyaya pravachaneccha, adidhayascha swadhyaya pravachaneccha. You can find this. It continues. I'm not going to go through the entire text right now. Just because after this we will read something much more maybe directly relevant to our times. So, learning and imparting the Vedas. Swadhyaya means one's own learning. Pravachana means imparting, teaching to others. In the family context, parents teach their children. And in the context of the Vedic schools, the teachers teach the disciples, the students. And then what do they teach? It's mentioned here, tapa. Tapasya swadhyaya pravachaneccha. Even religious observances that involve certain self-renunciation, self-denial, certain practices. So you find the entire Vedic culture was built upon this principle of the belief that you have to study the Vedas or recite the Vedas, which you may already have memorized, but still you recite. It's not that you are getting a new idea reading every day. No. Rather, reciting the Vedas itself will be beneficial. It will In fact, according to traditional belief, it purifies the air, the atmosphere. In fact, if you just chant Vedic mantras, or even if you play in some electronic system as people do these days, in fact, Vedic sounds themselves will have a purifying effect in the atmosphere, the environment in which we live. So that is why learning and imparting, teaching others, becomes not a duty but a sacred responsibility. For what? For our good and for the good of society. And that's why a number of related ideas are mentioned in this context. So then you find Dhammasta Swadhyaya Pravachanacha, self-restraint. Dhamma means self-restraint, self-control. So we said that if you take up the study of a holy book every day on a specific time, then what happens, the sense of sanctity and sacredness that you attach to that daily practice will have a refining, a sublimating effect on our mind. So we automatically start practicing values like Shama, Dhamma, etc. The Shamascha Swadhyaya Pravachanacha. So Shama means tranquility. And then Agnayascha Swadhyaya Pravachanacha. Then Agnihotramcha Swadhyaya Pravachanacha. Agnihotra was a daily fire sacrifice performed by the Vedic sages every day, morning and evening. They used to practice this. Every day they used to practice morning and evening, Agnihotra. So fire was considered to be something sacred in ancient Vedic culture. Then you find Adithayascha Swadhyaya Pravachana. Adithi means guest. So Adithayascha Swadhyaya Pravachanacha. So caring for the guests, people who visit your home accidentally. That's a real definition of Atithi. Not necessarily only those whom you invite. They are also guests. But people who may visit your home, maybe without previous information. We are talking about, let's say, human society as it was around maybe 6,000, 7,000 years back. So human population was not so huge. So people used to travel from places to places by walking. So naturally, maybe horseback or maybe bullock cart in ancient times. So they used to visit temples and friends' homes, and total strangers will visit your home, and it's your duty to look upon the guest and care for him. And that duty was considered to be a religious duty, a spiritual obligation, something to be done with a sense of sanctity and sacredness. Now, these are some of the common instructions meant for the whole society. Now, these instructions were given by the parents in their homes or by the teachers in the Vedic schools or Vedic hermitages. So, directly imparted, these teachings were imparted. That's why it is called Upanishad. Upa means means samipik. You should instruct students or your juniors sitting next to you, and then they should listen to these teachings with a sense of sanctity and politeness and humility. So the word ni, the particular upasarga prefix is implied here. After this, I am going to another very interesting part of this Taittiriya Upanishad. These Upanishad mantras are normally studied and taught and chanted, recited in a very traditional way, in a musical way. So the next subject we are going to discuss, it is a convocation address. the importance of this convocation address is, it is given to a group of students who have spent 12 years in the Vedic hermitage. So it is not instructions, a set of instructions coming from parents to children, but it is a convocation, a formal convocation address by a teacher who addresses the students who completed their education as brahmacharis. They were novitiates, and now they are about to go back to their homes to marry and become members of society, playing different roles, husbands and wives, mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, and how they should play their roles properly in the family structure, and also how they should be ideal members of society and responsible citizens of the country. So all these teachings are found in this convocation address. Arguably, I think this is the first convocation address ever delivered in the history of education, in the history of human civilization, because it is from Yajurveda, which is placed somewhere around 3000 BC. So it begins like this: Vedam anuchya acharyon devasinam anushasti. So Vedam anuchya acharyaha andevasinam anushasti. So after teaching the Vedas, Acharya, the teacher, and Devasi is the student, Anushasti, instructs. Satyam bada dharmam chara swadhyaya anma pramadaha acharyaya priyam dhanamahritya prajatandum ma vyavachet. This is how it begins. So the first instruction is you should speak the truth, and then you should follow the proper conduct. So proper conduct means dharmam, proper conduct. So you should conduct yourself according to certain principles. The dharma is the practical aspect of Vritam, which I described just now. Vritam is something that preserves the invisible order behind the entire existence. So Vritam means something that preserves, that protects, that sustains peace and tranquility and harmonious existence of society. And dharma is the way to behave ourselves so that we do not disturb this rhythm, this harmony. So that's why it is satyam vada dharmam chara. You speak the truth, and then your conduct should be according to rhythm. So that conduct is called dharma. So dharma is something that preserves. That word dharma also has got the meaning dhrudhatu, Sanskrit word, means something that sustains, that supports, that preserves. If you preserve that, it doesn't fall, it doesn't get disturbed. So our behavior, our conduct, not only towards others, not only our conduct towards people outside of us, but also towards our own feelings and emotions, our own feelings, our reaction to our own happiness and unhappiness, success and failure, pain and pleasure, should be done in such a way as not to disturb, not to create conflict in this world. So that way of conducting ourselves in society and family this context is called dharma. So remember, it is a preparation for a student to return home after education. That process of returning home is called samaavartana. That's that formal beginning of education is called Upanayana. Means you are teaching, you are bringing the student towards knowledge. Upa, Sami, close to knowledge. That is a kind of initiation of education, beginning of education. That is the, let's say, the kindergarten, the whole process of education is called Upanayana, and its conclusion is called Samavartana. So here the student, according to Vedic tradition, the student would undergo studies for 12 years and then he'll be returning home. At that time, the teacher tells the student, you should speak the truth. Satyam vada dharmam chara. You should act and behave according to the principles of dharma. And again, you should not ignore, neglect the sacred duty of studying the scriptures every day. That is Swadhyayat ma pramadaha. Swadhyaya means one's own self-study. So if you make it a habit every day to study a few portions of a holy book, any book that you may, but in Hindu tradition, Vedas were so sacred because Vedas do not ask you to think of your own prosperity alone. Throughout the Vedic literature you find the emphasis, let us act ourselves, let us conduct ourselves so that the whole world remains in peace and tranquility. So, Swadhyayat ma pramadaha. You should not be negligent or indifferent. You should pay heed to the responsibility of studying, reciting these holy books, Vedic mantras, every day with a sense of sanctity and sacredness. Then Acharyaya Priyam Dhanamahritya Prajatantum Ma Vyavachet Sihi. So you find here a very interesting discussion. Normally, Vedic education was free. The teachers were not paid by the king or the government. And the students were not expected to pay tuition fees at the time of education. But at the conclusion of education, it was a normal custom that a student has to present something to his teacher. It's called dakshina. It depends upon the type of student. If he says, in ancient times, sometimes kings and emperors, fabulously rich people, wealthy people, also went to forest hermitages to study under the Vedic sages, the teachers. And sometimes very simple people from remote villages without any wealth also went to study under the same teacher. They were all treated with equal status. The king will be studying along with ignorant, maybe a poor boy coming from a village. If the poor boy, after finishing education, he may make a gift of maybe a few fruits, and king may make a gift of, after finishing education, make a gift of maybe a number of villages to the teacher, so that the teacher will be able to give free education to a number of poor students who cannot pay any gift. So that kind of gift was called dakshina. So that's why Acharyaya Priyam Dhanamahritya Prajatantum Ma Vyavachet Sihi. So these students used to give some gift to the teacher as a token of respect and gratitude after the education is over. It was not feast, it was for their own pleasure, and it was given as a token of gratitude and respect by the students, the teacher. And then there is another instruction given here. Prajatantum ma vivachetsi. What it means is, take care. You should take special care. You should take care. You make sure that that the line of your race is not broken. What it means is that student who has finished his education, he should go home. Then he should start his life as a regular citizen. This is normal practice. In some very few cases, these students immediately take to mendicancy. They became monks. There were also a few such cases. But the majority, 99.9% of the student community, used to go back to their homes and they used to marry. They will take some vows that they will preserve their line of family by giving birth to the next generation and teach those their own children the same principles, the same ideas, spiritual ideas, ethical, moral ideas that they have learned from their teacher in the hermitage, Vedic hermitage. So that's why, Prajatandum ma vivachetsi. Make sure that your lineage is preserved. Make sure that it is not broken. So that was the instruction given here. Then satyana pramadidavyam, you find you should always make sure that you don't deviate from the path of truth. This continues. Kushalana pramadidavyam, bhutena pramadidavyam, swadhyaya prapachanabhyam na pramadidavyam, deva pitragaryabhyam na pramadidavyam, etc. So you find this instruction continues. Says, you should not be negligent, should not be indifferent towards your duties, swadhyaya and also pravachana, and also towards your duties and work for making money through proper means for the maintenance of your family and also for helping your relatives, and if possible, if you are still wealthy, still more wealthy, helping the people around in the same village. So you find a blend of high idealism and realism, a blend of the highest spiritual, ethical and moral values on the one hand, and also the important secular values that you need: efficiency, work ethic, kushalana pramadidavyam, atmarekshanartha karmanaha na pramadidavyam. That is Shankaracharya's commentary. What he says, but Bhashyakara Adi Shankara says, you should never neglect to do things properly for your own preservation, for the sustenance of your family, for the prosperity of your relatives. You should be always vigilant and efficient in the conduct of your duties and responsibilities as parents, as members of society, and also as the citizens of the country. So not only that, of course, I don't have time to go through the Bhashya of Shankaracharya and some of the related super commentaries on this Upanishad. Taittiriya, Bhashya Vartikam is there. So there are many other commentaries written on the Taittiriya tradition. There are clear statements. An householder who doesn't work hard to make money through proper means for the preservation of his family, he is wrong. He is practicing adharma. He is practicing the opposite of dharma. So it was a duty, it was a sacred duty and responsibility of an householder to take care of his parents, his wife and children, and also it was his duty to make enough money. Bhutena pramadidavyam, you find here. You should work hard to make enough money so that he will be able to look after his proper duties to his family, to society and to country properly. That's why in the coming paragraph you find Matu Devo Bhava, Pitu Devo Bhava, Acharya Devo Bhava, Adithi Devo Bhava. This convocation address continues. I think that's again historically the first convocation address where a teacher tells the students that you should respect your mother and father and your teacher, and also you should take care of your guests. So of course they are using a metaphor, the language of figures of metaphors. He says you should respect and honor your parents, your teacher and your guest with as much reverence and respect with which you respect or honor God Himself. So Madru Devo Bhava means let your mother be your gods. I mean your, let us say, Devas, your Devi, whatever it means. Let your father be your Deva. Deva means the angel, divine beings. So also your teacher. So gratitude and respect and reverence for teachers and parents, that take care of a lot of problems in society. So you can imagine, I believe personally that this convocation address is more relevant today than when it was delivered for the first time, let us say maybe 6,000 years back. I mean the sanctity and sacredness of family values. And on the other hand, there are teachings in the Bhagavata Purana where it is stated the parents who do not take care of the spiritual welfare of their children hardly qualified to be called parents. Such strong statements you find in the Bhagavata Purana, which actually considered by Vaishnavites and the devotional philosophers with the same respect and honor with which they read the Vedas. So, Idam Bhagavatam Brahma Samvidam, the Bhagavata Purana says Bhagavata is as great, it has the same status as Vedas because it is a very profound book. So you find, on the one hand, Bhagavata Purana tells you that parents who don't take care of the children, who do not bring them up with these values when they are small, what happens? They are not doing their duty. Similarly, children who, after receiving education, after being brought up by the parents, do not care for looking after their parents, they are also practicing adharma. So you find such profound teachings which are relevant not only in spiritual context but even the secular context. You can find such great teachings here. Matu Devo Bhava, Pitu Devo Bhava, Acharya Devo Bhava, Adithi Devo Bhava. And then after this statement, Yani Anavadhyani Karmani Tani Sevidavyani No Itarani. That is a very interesting statement. The Vedic teacher who makes these statements next tells the student, look here, you stayed in this hermitage, Vedic hermitage for so many years and we taught you, you were students. Now whatever you have found in us teachers, which is worthy of emulation, worthy of respect and honor, that you practice in your own life. That's the idea behind. So whatever which is irreproachable in our conduct. You may have seen certain ways of acting and interacting with people in our life, if you find them to be beyond reproach, find them to be worthy of emulation, then you practice them, you also imbibe those values. And if there are certain things that you may not very much agree with, don't worry about it. So you find there is a disclaimer. So you can, on the one hand, there is the instruction which will help the students to become lifelong students themselves. That is Acharya Devo Bhava. You should always respect your teacher, because even after leaving the Vedic hermitage, in many cases great scholars used to continue their education even after entering householder's life, after marriage and bearing children. Again they will continue their education. You should pay respect to your teachers. And not only that, you should respect your parents, you should take care of your relatives, and you should pay respect to the guests. I mean, our interaction with others who happen to visit our home, we should show proper respect, etc. So you can find certain values taught which are relevant and important not only in spiritual context but also in the secular context. Now these are two examples of instructions you find in the Taittiriya Upanishad. One is a set of instructions, general instructions for society as a whole. Rutam cha swadhyaya pravajane cha, satyam cha swadhyaya pravajane cha, damas cha swadhyaya pravajane cha, shamas cha swadhyaya pravajane cha, etc. You should practice Rutam, Satyam, and Dhamma, self-restraint, tranquility, peace, and you should read holy scriptures every day so that you be reminded of these great values, which is general instruction. Then you find a long convocation address, which I don't have time to go through. I want to just to briefly introduce another part of the Upanishad and then conclude. And then the second, just now I already discussed the convocation address, where the instructor, the teacher, imparts certain values to the students who are now going back to their homes to marry and become householders themselves, to play different roles in society and family, to become ideal husbands, ideal wife, because women are also receiving Vedic education in ancient Vedic times, in the Vedic period. How they should be ideal sons and daughters, mothers and fathers and citizens and members of society and so on. Now we are going to another very profound part of this Upanishad. It is in the Bhrigu. It is a different kind of, it's a different example. Here, a boy is asking some questions to his father, and he is not asking for anything worldly. He is asking for the highest spiritual wisdom. So it begins, Bhriguvai Varunihi Varunam Pitaram Upasasara Adhihi Bhagavo Brahmedi. That's how it begins. She chanted like this, Bhriguvai Varunihi Varunam Pitaram Upasasara Adhihi Bhagavo Brahmedi. Like that begins. So Varuna is a name of a sage, and his son is Bhrigu. So this particular part of the Upanishad, which deals with a kind of meditation, a meditative practice of a very profound kind of meditation, is called Varuni Vidya. It is called. And this particular section is called Bhrigu. This section. This chapter is called Bhrigu because this chapter deals with the debate between Bhrigu and his father, Varuna. So he's asking the question. So Varunam Pitaram Upasasara, he went to his father and asked him, Adhihi Bhagavo Brahmedi, please teach me about Brahman. Please teach me about the highest spiritual reality. Now, when this question comes from the little boy, the father, surprisingly, is not asking the son to go and pray or to go to a temple or a church or a place of worship. He is giving a very profound answer. Tadumho vaja, father tells, Yato va imani bhudani jayante yena jatani jivandi yen prayantya abhisam visandi tad vijijñasa swatam brahma iti. He says, from what absolute reality the entire creation emerges, and what sustains this world, everything that exists in the world, and finally towards what the entire creation gets dissolved. So what is the point of origination of the universe? Whatever you see around, annam pranam chakshusrotram mano vachamiti, the trees and mountains and valleys, annam pranam, breath, energy, mind, its faculties, its senses, their faculties. Where do they come from? So is there a common origin for all that you find in the world? Where do they come from? And finally, what sustains them? And finally, what happens to them? Into what do they all get dissolved? So, the answer given is Annam Pranam Chakshusotram Mano Vachamiti Yatova Imani Bhudani Jayante Yena Jatani Jivandi Yet Prayantya Abhisam Visanti Tad Vijijñasa Swata Brahma. This is the idea. Now, if you want to know these things, what you should do? You should meditate. I mean, tapasa brahma vijijñasa swa. Tapa means meditation, self-restraint, tranquility, withdrawing our mind and attention from external things, and then meditate and find out the origin of the universe. So it's very profound. Now, you can find the convocation addressed to this part of the Upanishad. You can see with long distance. On the one hand, in the convocation address, the teacher asks the students to be an ideal citizen. Right on this earth, when you live, what you should do in your family sitting. And now, a totally different picture is emerging. When a little boy asked father a question, I want to know Brahman. I want to know the absolute reality. The father tells him, well, you try to find out, think of from where all these worldly, all the empirical objects emerge, and finally what sustains them and what happens to them, into what they all get dissolved. So now Bhrigu, the little boy, started meditation. He went through 4 stages of meditation. Finally, he reached the 5th stage, the supreme goal. So, Annam Brahme Divyajanat. Then, he said, first he realized, well, Anna is Brahman. Anna means matter. Then he realized Prana is Brahman. Then mind is Brahman. And the intellect is Brahman. So at each stage, he went and told his father, I have realized the point of the original cause of the universe. Matter is everything. From matter everything comes. Father told him, no, you are wrong. Go and meditate again. And he meditated. And then he thought, well, vital energy. That is the origin of the universe. The father corrected him, no, continue your meditation. He again meditated for a long time. Then he thought mind was everything. Father told, wrong. Then he thought intellect was everything. Father continued asking him to meditate again. Eventually he realized the Anandam Brahme Divyajanat, Satchidanandam, the existence, knowledge, bliss. That's absolute reality. When he realized this, the boy became silent because he realized the supreme truth. So I don't have time to go through the entire text. So you find these contrasting examples. On the one hand, instructions on how to conduct ourselves in this world, for people belonging to different walks of life, whether you are working in the factory, in the university, or you are a professor, or you are a farmer, whatever may be a job, how you should conduct yourself, how to be friendly with your environment. Ritam means you should be friendly with your environment, and how to practice dharma, how to practice satya, and how to be an ideal son or daughter, how to be an ideal father or mother, how to be an ideal member of the society or a citizen of the country. So, how to live an ideal life in this world, that is one part of the instruction. And then, in another example, you find one of the most profound discussions on the absolute reality, a debate and discussion between a father and his son, Bhrigu and Varuna. So, now we will have interaction maybe for half an hour. You are most welcome to ask questions in general or also based on what we discussed today. Most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Swamiji. I have a couple of questions for you.
Yeah.
So my first question is, you were talking about how our reactions in society and family, which is basically our conduct, should not cause conflict, and this is what we know as dharma, right?
Yeah.
So how does this play with the whole Bhagavad Gita situation where Arjuna is trying to understand what his dharma is, and there he is trying to avoid conflict at some level, right? So how does that dharma, how do these two statements sit together?
Arjuna, if Arjuna was trying to avoid conflict in his mind, and actually if he had his way, then Arjuna's withdrawal from his duty would have created so many more conflicts all over the world, because he was running away from his sacred duty, which would have created many more conflicts around. So he was trying to run away from his duty. He sort of looking for an answer to do his duty in a way so that it won't create any problem for anybody. He thought by running away from his duty, he can he will be doing the right thing. Another important thing, if you read Mahabharata, you find Arjuna was speaking out of cowardice, ignorance, and lethargy. He by nature he was an active person, not a coward. He was a great warrior. But when he saw in front of him great warriors, who were many of them greater than himself, like Bhishma, Drona and others, Karna and others, he felt worried. Because he had come to the battlefield knowing fully well it was his duty. And in fact, Mahabharata war, if you look at the whole story, it involved a great cause, a noble cause, because by Mahabharata war, the whole society was saved from a terrible tyranny of Duryodhana. Duryodhana and his dynasty, they were scourge of humanity of those times. That's why Lord Krishna himself did his best to bring matters to a peace. But Duryodhana, Dushasana, all the evil characters in the Mahabharata epic, they didn't agree with that. They were not willing to avoid a war. So finally they had to decide. At the point of his this conflict. So this, according to great men like Madhusudana and others, Arjuna had little fear, but he was trying to give a false justification for his lethargy and cowardice. That's what you find in the Mahabharata. I shall give an example. You see, in 1938-39, Hitler was a great monstrous dictator. He was in Germany and become the most powerful military in the world. At that time, Neville Chamberlain was British Prime Minister. He thought he can enter into a peace pact, and he did that. In fact, he went to Berlin and he signed a treaty, and that caused so much of destruction all over Europe. Because after that, Hitler invaded Poland, Czechoslovakia, and eventually France, and then that is how the whole tragedy unfolded, that big tragedy of Second World War. If Hitler had been stopped on time, there would have been no Second World War. But Britain, British Prime Minister especially, he thought he can avoid a conflict and thereby bring peace. So what happened? He could not avoid a conflict and he could not avoid war either. So you find Mahabharata has got a great lesson for historians and even for statesmen. There's at some point you find, to save society, to save humanity, somebody had to act. In fact, there are long discussions on this very subject in Mahabharata, thousands of slokas, thousands of verses, huge portions of Mahabharata discussing statecraft. So frequently, when we feel lazy, we may try to justify our inaction, taking a page from philosophy. That's what Arjuna did actually. Really find nagam she vijayam krishna nachirajam sukhani cha kim no rajyena bhoginda kim bhoge jivitena va. You find all this in the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. But Krishna could see through Arjuna's mind. So remember, if you look at the entire Mahabharata, you find what Lord Krishna did was his best to save the world, to save women, children, old people, weak people. The whole society was saved by getting rid of a bunch of evildoers. That is what Lord Krishna accomplished. Yeah.
Thank you, Swamiji. Swamiji, my other question was, when you were discussing rhythm, right? You were saying that it is a duty of parents to teach these values, the Vedas, to the next generation. It's a duty of gurus to teach it to their students and so on. Now, is there a preconditioning to who should, is there a condition to who should learn the Vedas? And because this is something that is thrown around as a big criticism of the Hindu Dharma today, where they are saying that it is exclusive to some people and it is not everyone is not allowed to learn the Vedas and so on.
Yeah.
So is there such a, in formation, was there such a rule, and is this something that has just come down with time?
These restrictions came during the period of Smritis. So Hindu society is a very ancient society. You should not go by the judgment of modern historians. Frequently, many people write books on Vedas without knowing one word of Sanskrit, without reading any book on Vedas. Frequently, this is happening in today's world. So you should know that during the early Vedic period, there is no restriction. So according to historians, during the later Vedic, after the later Vedic period, and Vedic period is divided to two: first Vedic period, early Vedic period, later Vedic period. After the later Vedic period, there were a lot of invasions from across the border that India had to face. So during those days, people faced a lot of problems, and women folk faced a lot of problems, and poor people, weak people faced a lot of problems. So what happens, a lot of social restrictions were imposed on society as a whole in different places. As part of this, education, Vedic education was not extended to women folk, and a large sections of Hindu society during the Smriti period. Smriti period means the books that deal with the code of conduct, which are subject to changes, which are of contemporary importance only, not of eternal importance. So So Shruti and Smriti, you should remember these two sections of books. Shrutis are the Vedas, which are eternal relevance and importance and application. Smritis have only contemporary importance in application. Contemporary for those days, for those times. So during the Smriti period, a lot of restrictions were imposed. But I think after Dayananda Saraswati's movement to propagate the Vedas, Vedas are open to all. Right from the later decades of 19th century to our own times, now I don't think anyone can read Vedas. There are thousands of editions, hundreds of editions of the Vedas. Vedic books, I'm not talking about entire Vedas, Upanishads, and different sections from the Vedas you find. It's not available to everyone, anyone can read it. The ritualistic way of learning the Vedas mostly based on family tradition. It has something to do with the social structure. So only a small handful of people were willing to come forward and sacrifice their everything just to preserve the Vedas. And Vedas were preserved thanks to those people. So that is a different thing. But Vedas were open to all. Not only that, if you read the works of Tulsidas Ramcharitamanas, if you read the works of the Alvars and Nayammars, if you read books written in non-Sanskrit languages, they are all taken from the Vedas only. Vedic teachings were available and became current and prevalent through so many vernacular forms all over India. And of course, from late 18th century onwards, Vedas are available in German, in English, in Latin. Even some portions were translated Latin by Duperov in the early decades of 19th century. So now Vedas are available everywhere. Yeah. One of the great writers, translators of Rigvedic mantras was, his name is Raimundo Panikya. And he was teaching, he was in charge of Indian studies in Rome, in Vatican. So Vedas are studied all over the world, you find. Vedic Experience, that's the name of the book. Mantra Manchari, he wrote well-known translation of Vedic mantras. So to say that, Vedas, nobody can study the Vedas in this 21st century is absolutely has no basis. During certain centuries it happened, but right now those restrictions are gone once for all. Happily, thankfully so.
Thank you so much, Swami.
Yeah.
Swamiji, this is Bobby Coleman.
Oh yeah, most welcome. Yeah, I was expecting some.
I'd like to ask you about the very closing, the very closing verse, the very closing section.
Yeah.
Is quite a send-off, quite inspired.
Yeah.
Continue past the body of the text itself.
Yeah.
I wondered what you might have to say about
The
poetic exhortation as you close.
The section that I referred to during the later part, towards the end of the class, That's called
the very last verse of the Upanishad.
Yeah. So, that which I already discussed, that one.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Now, it's a very interesting discussion. It is called the science of, it's called Varuni Vidya, the science of meditation taught by Varuna. Varuna here is the name of a sage. To his son, his name was Bhrigu. Now, the meditation is very simple. Well, if you want to know the absolute reality, then think of, from where do all these mountains and valleys, sky and clouds, which constitute the empirical world, mind, matter, senses, where do they come from? Don't you think there should be a common origin from which all of them emerged. And there should be something, some fundamental principle which sustains them. And then there is a change happening all the time in this empirical, phenomenal world. Change implies gradual chain of modifications. So finally, what happens to them? Where do they all get dissolved? Think of that. And the son, okay, I shall think of that. The tapasa brahma vijijnasasva, that's the meaning. Means, understand this, realize this through tapa. Tapa actually means the practice of self-restraint, self-control, turning the mind inward. Mind normally turns towards external objects through the senses. Now withdraw the senses from external objects and turn the mind inward, and then you find something strikes you within your own, the center of your being. That should be the answer. Okay, the boy agreed. And he meditated. And at the first stage, he was naturally very gross-minded. His mind was very gross. So he thought, well, this matter is the beginning of everything. It's matter that sustains everything. And it's matter that eventually everything gets dissolved into. And he went and told his father, I meditated. I have found out. Matter is everything. Father told him, no, you are wrong. Continue your meditation. Tapasa brahma vijijnasa. So it repeats. You continue your meditation through tapa, through this internal spiritual journey, inquiry, self-control, self-restraint. At the second stage, the boy again came back to his father, told him, yes, I found out. Pranam Brahma Vijnana. Pranam Brahma Vijnana means Pranam is Brahman. Vijnana means I understood, I realized. Prana means vital energy, vital energy. Energy that activates our senses, our mind, our entire psychophysical system. That is prana. So prana is everything. Because without prana, these external things cannot function. And then father told him, you are wrong again. Continue. The third stage, he thought mind was everything. Because when you cognize something, when you see something, then only it exists for you. So if I don't recognize something with my mind, it doesn't exist. And if my mind doesn't recognize something, then it's no more existing. And when it disappears from my mind, it gets dissolved. So long as mind is perceiving something, it exists. Father told him, no, you are wrong again for the third time. You continue your meditation. He repeats, tapasa brahma vijijnasasva. Again you realize this through tapa. Tapa means this spiritual practice, penance, meditation. Again the son told father, I've realized the truth. Is intellect. So vijnanam brahme divyajanat. Vijnanam brahme divyajanat means vijnana means intellect. Intellect is a decision-making faculty which goes beyond mind, because mind is fluctuating, conflicting thought currents. When you decide something, it's a decide-directive faculty. This intellect. Father told him, you're wrong again. And then he continued his spiritual practices. We don't know how long it took the little boy. He was no more a boy when he realized this. He may become an old man himself. Finally, at the last stage, he realized Anandam Brahme Divya. Ananta actually means that feeling of inner bliss and tranquility that comes to you when you know something, when you realize something, when you attain something. Well, the most simple example in education psychology, if you are a school teacher let's say kindergarten school teacher. Suppose you're teaching something to small little children who are sitting in front of you. You are trying to explain maybe a poem, or maybe you are trying to explain something, a story. And if the child immediately understands what you are saying, his whole eyes get brightened up. Because he is feeling a kind of inner bliss. He is feeling a kind of inner fulfillment. Oh yes, now I understand. So that is the grossest example of Ananda. Ananda, I'm just giving an example. Ananda is the feeling that, well, I have realized this. It cannot be expressed. It is something that cannot be expressed. It is Satchidananda, means the existence, knowledge, bliss, absolute. So that is the original cause of the universe. That is what is preserving the universe, and that is what the universe gets dissolved into. That's the point of dissolution. So everything happens, exists, get dissolved, and again reappears in this Satchidananda Brahman. That's the real answer. When he realized this, he had obtained the supreme truth. So it's a very, very well-known, a celebrated chapter in the Bhrigu, third section of the Upanishad.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Next week, we will have a discussion on Taittiriya Upanishad. Taittiriya Upanishad is from Rigveda Samhita. So, we will discuss that. It's just relatively small Upanishad. We'll discuss that.
Swamiji?
Yeah.
This is Mark Goodrich. I have a question for you about Swadhyaya.
Yeah.
In my tradition, Swadhyaya has been identified as chanting and reciting sacred texts.
Yeah.
Is there something more to Swadhyaya than just chanting and reciting sacred texts?
Yeah, that's what it implies in normal practice by traditional Hindus. But if you go for a deeper meaning of the word Swadhyaya, one should read it with full understanding of the meaning of what you are reading and of sanctity and sacredness is called Swadhyaya. Yeah, that's true. But again, you should understand the meaning so that when you do Swadhyaya like that, then you have a natural tendency to go deeper into the meaning, the sense of what you study. It's called Mananam. So, if a person really studies something, reads something with a great sense of sanctity and sacredness, he will not immediately forget it. After some time, again his mind will be moving the world of those ideas that he has already recited, already read about. So that's a proof that it has gone deeper. So that is called Swadhyaya. Okay. Studying in a meaningful manner with a sense of sanctity and sacredness. The same thing that you are doing actually. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I have had a question. How can we as householders, understand Atma Vidya and become like Bhrigu and, gain from, go beyond just listening to lectures, learn the way to discovering the Atman inside us?
Yeah. You'd be surprised, many of the sages who are teaching these Upanishads in the Vedic hermitage, they were all householders, retired householders, many of them. Vanaprastha-ashramites, retired householders. Many of them. There are not too many among them who are really monks. There were no doubt Shuka and all, they were Narada, they were all monks, but then a good number of them were householders. Yajnavalkya, he was an householder. Janaka was a king, naturally a householder. Ashwapati was a king in Chandogya Upanishad. So a good number of them were householders. So how this must have worked during the Vedic times must be, if they must have led ideal lives as householders, then after some years they must have retired to forest hermitages and spent the rest of the lifetime in meditation and also imparting the Vedas. It was a common practice in ancient times for householders to retire to Vedic hermitages. Husband and wife will retire to these forest hermitages, stay there and spend the rest of the lifetime imparting the Vedas. That's how the Vedas were preserved. So you find different gotras, Gautama Gotra, Parashara Gotra, Bharadwaja, Vishwamitra Gotra, And also Vedic text also, Vedic, different versions of Vedic text. They are different because they were, the different versions of the same Vedic text were preserved with slight variations, not much, by different Vedic teachers, because they taught their students in a particular way, and that tradition continued among large number of succeeding generations of teachers and students. Like that, so there were minor variations. That's why Pradha Vedas are the Vedic tradition. So you have to remember, a good number of the ancient Vedic teachers were householders or retired householders. Not all. There were many monks also. So householders can do their duty every day. They can do the Swadhyaya, reading every day. So this practice of reading every day with the sense of sanctity and sacredness will help you to, will help those ideas to go deeper and become part of your thinking process, even when you are involved in secular duties and responsibilities. And then our mind, our thought, the way people look after the children, they bring up their children, all this be influenced by this Vedic culture. So Vedas teach certain very fundamental universal truths which are open to all. So, yeah, it's the heritage of humanity. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So, do you think that the term Brahman means the same across? Like, do you feel like that reference is the same across all the Upanishads, or would they mean different things?
Could you repeat the question? The sound is not very clear, not very clearly audible. Could you repeat once more?
Yeah, sorry. So, no, I was asking about the term Brahman. Like, do you feel that the term Brahman is consistent across all the Upanishads and other scriptures?
Yeah. Oh yeah, the word Brahman has got different meanings. It means Vedas also. It means the absolute reality, which is the cause of the universe, sustaining principle of the universe. That's what it means. The word Brahman is interpreted differently by different schools of Vedanta, like Vishishtadvaita, Brahmanuja, Advaita, Madhvacharya. Like that, there are different schools of philosophers who interpreted the meaning, the word Brahman differently. But according to non-dualistic philosophy, it is consistently interpreted the same meaning, the same implication. Yeah. So thank you for the wonderful questions. Your questions help me to emphasize certain areas that I may have just overlooked during the lecture. Thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.